Good morning, listeners. Thank you for joining us for yet another Conversations Across the World. Reverend Laws, welcome to this episode of Conversations Across the World. It's my pleasure to have you.
Thank you so very much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here.
On Monday of this week, Jamaicans were awakened to a story, one that shocked and rocked not only the Christian community, but Jamaicans at large. Reverend Laws, as a pastor, as a Christian, how did this story make you feel? And of course, listeners, we are speaking about the alleged human sacrifice at a particular church in Mobay, St. James.
All right. Joseph, let me tell you, first of all, I saw the message quite late. The messages had come, you know how it is in the mornings. Persons, as soon as they wake up and they get news, they send it off. Well, I not have my normal morning duties, early morning, which I set out on from, say, after 6 in the morning. So I actually did not see this message until after 9, when I finally decided, okay, I can now check the phone because I now have the time. And there I saw a series of pictures and clippings, and I'm like, what happened now? And it was absolutely shocking. Shocking because, not because I don't think that these things can happen in Jamaica, but shocking because of just what transpired in terms of the actual killings in the venue that had taken place, and that this was said to be human sacrifice. I really was just absolutely blown away by that. And of course, immediately I set out to do my research to find out more about what transpired. So I really, and then of course, to offer comfort, because this was the next thing now. By this, a number of messages were coming in from other individuals, friends, family members, church members, persons who just wanted to express their feelings and to receive some assurance what is happening. Is the world ending? What is taking place? So that was where, from hearing the news, doing research, offering condolences and comfort and sympathies and so on. I really just also now want to take the opportunity, just in case anyone related to any of the victims, whether those who have perished, who were killed, or victims of the experience itself being in the organization, just offer them sympathies and condolences, and that really, we really need to be praying for our people, for them as well.
Most definitely, Rev. We indeed need to be in support and to show solidarity through prayer and offer our own commitment of assistance where we can. But yes, let's talk a little though about religious cultism in Jamaica, because most definitely is not a first for us that we have heard or seen this kind of thing coming out. How do we, as a Christian community, as a people, relate to such an act? How do we begin to understand it?
Mm-hmm. All right, so that this is a great place to start. How do we begin to understand? And this, I believe, is perhaps at the heart of the matter of cults. You see, Joseph, nobody starts a cult. People don't get up and start cults. That's the thing we need to understand. And no organization calls itself a cult. The term that is used when we use the word cult, we have to understand that when we're thinking sociologically, from the perspective of sociology in general or sociology of religion, we're talking about the way that scholars, academics, researchers, independent or aligned to organizations or institutions, seek to define organizations and groups that they see how they present themselves and express themselves in the world or in society, as opposed to or in comparison with similar groups. So that's important. So that's where that's one of the critical things we need to understand, that you're not going to see a big sign put up, welcome to the Spanish Town Road cult. You're not going to see that. So this is where we need to begin. How do I understand this? And this is perhaps a bigger question of how are our Christians really thinking about matters in general? And unfortunately, I really have to say that when criticisms are leveled at the Christian community, a lot of it cannot be dismissed as being unfounded. Very often you will hear people talk about wanting, yearning for Christians to exercise critical thinking, and that persons should begin to use their brains. And this is critical and important, because the truth is, we are a people of faith, and what we believe very often cannot be proven. You can't just use scientific formula to prove it. It's faith. It's a claim that we believe, and we have a deep conviction and a trust in God, and we speak about that. And of course, when you get into the realm of faith, you're beginning to talk about things that are subjective, meaning that it may be your experience, and you can't tell somebody else that about what you are going through or what you're experiencing, and someone might not be able to see what you say you believe. That is one of the issues. Now, because we say we're a people of faith, doesn't mean that we don't think. It doesn't mean that we don't work with facts. It doesn't mean that we dismiss science. And I think that is perhaps one of the issues that we have not been able to resolve in our historical coming into being as church in the African diaspora. And by that, I mean that the way we have been Christianized has helped a lot to foster ignorance among our people. And by that, I mean that it is done in such a way that the knowledge, all knowledge resides in the pastor, the priest, the missionary. And you must not question that knowledge, because after all, they're the ones who went to theological college. Let me say, we are the ones who went to theological college. How dare you question us? We should know more than you do. And there is a challenge and a problem in that. Yes, you want to trust your leaders because they have received training. But the responsibility of a leader is not to lead people and keep people ignorant, but it is to empower your people such that they may grow. And then out of, even among and from that growth, you will find persons who will themselves sense that the call to become leaders as well for others. So understanding, I use all of that to point out how critical understanding is, because not many people want to know more than what their pastor tells them, or more than what they hear from some other preacher. And that is a major problem. So cultism in Jamaica is real. Real as in, we have more cults in Jamaica than we know of. And I can make that claim because of course, if we're talking about a cult, what is a cult? And we would say that you have a group or an organization or even an institution that is that emerges on the scene or becomes known. That doesn't mean it didn't exist before quietly, but it now becomes known, and they have novel or distinct differences and beliefs. They hold such strong beliefs that seem to set them apart from what the rest of people comparatively believe. And by that I mean they may be a church, they may be constituted as a church, but it's not only religious organizations that you'll find a cult in. And I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit more. But you would know that this is a group that is new. It appears revolutionary. It appears different. It carries one or more a body of beliefs and the principles and disciplines and ways of being that seems to set it apart from others, and people and its members are encouraged to revel in their differences, and of course to ensure that they do not mix with the rest of society and other groups lest they become polluted or contaminated. There should be no mixing. But it doesn't really start out like this immediately, Joseph, and that is why people don't understand them. They tend to, sometimes they start out this distinct and you would spot and say, oh, this group is different. But the difference doesn't seem harmful or destructive at first. So that is usually the thing that a lot of people miss. Because it doesn't start out looking harmful or dangerous, it is seductive and it pulls people in. It seems harmless, just different and radical and revolutionary. And then, of course, the group is going to grow and evolve and change. And then you begin to see when something happens or you get reports of happenings, that's when people then begin to say, oh, this isn't what we thought it was. It is, in fact, a cult.
Rev, interestingly, you spoke about it evolving. From the news, we hear of some pre-Sunday loyalty, and we're still now hearing of some post-Sunday loyalty. It's almost as if those who are now still loyal haven't yet seen the picture.
Mm-hmm.
What could have led to that kind of a loyalty?
All right, in terms of the evolution of these groups, and in this case in particular, we're really doing a lot of speculation, because we are just hearing now some of the former members and even current members finally now begin to speak. And even members now, current members, when they speak, they're expressing shock. However, here's where I'd like to make a distinction so that persons can begin to put this organization in context. And then I really do hope, Joseph, that by this conversation, people can begin to look inward. The name cult was not applied to this group publicly until, and in this kind of a way, in a mass way, until human sacrifice took place, until the association with killings, death in such a gruesome manner took place. That is when people begin to apply the term cult. So the members themselves were perhaps lulled, and usually that's what happens, lulled into thinking that this is okay, that there really isn't anything dangerous going on. And that is easy for persons to do, Joseph, far more easier than many of us want to admit. And I'll put it this way. We have in Jamaica a number of instances of what we would call cult of personalities or personality cults. And maybe that is the place where we need to start, because really and truly, what is happening, why persons are unable to make sense of what has taken place, what has transpired in terms of the killings, is that persons have become drawn into such veneration, almost to the point of worship and idolizing, admiring and adoring the leader. And also, in some instances, fearful and intimidated, especially if the leader demonstrates anything that appears supernatural or superhuman, or dazzled with any kind of powers. Then persons will certainly be afraid to cross that person, because they would believe that the individual possesses supernatural powers or superhuman powers, and they really can't mess with that. So they'd be afraid. And that fear, that shock and awe would have them afraid to really test the boundaries. Some will leave, some will gather the courage and out of fear would leave because they would say, no, what I'm seeing is frightening. But some will stay because they have invested in this. They have given their life to this individual and the organization. And so they are not able now to believe what they have seen, because maybe what has been happening has been going on for such a long time that you have grown immune, or you just excuse it and say, I saw pastor stay. Sure, I know nothing. Or give you an example. I remember years ago serving in a particular space, and some young people were being a little bit out of hand in terms of how we, the adults, viewed them. And I remember a couple elderly members came to me and said, I really should beat the young people. And they were serious. They weren't joking. They meant that because a predecessor used to take off his belt and beat the young people. No, that's not strange. There are other places where that has taken place. And there are places where it is still taking place. What did the people mean when they say that I should do that? By that time, this leader would have risen in their esteem, that they felt this fatherly love from the beatings. So they saw that it was care and love and concern, that he was whipping them into shape. They did not equate that with abuse. They did not equate it with being extremely out of order and wrong. They could never see that. So when I didn't readily embrace it, and did not at all, let me just hasten to add, I must tell you that I was then seen then as the slack pastor because I putting up with slackness. We live in a culture where authoritarian figures are admired and are seen as figures of, yes, this is someone of great discipline and so on. So when someone such as the pastor of this organization that we're discussing emerges on the scene and evolves, possibly had these traits before, but who evolves over time, being more and more controlling, which is one of the manifestations in cultic organizations. An authoritarian figure who starts out with small requests or not, but trust me, those requests are going to get grander and grander, far more controlling of you, controlling of family life, controlling of your finances and your resources, your property, controlling of your movements, controlling of your relationships and your connections. Control is essential if you want to maintain your distinctives and to keep away mixing. Now, persons will see this as love and attention, and pastor is so loving and want to ensure that we remain pure. So Joseph, people will not necessarily see it as harm until it reaches a particular extreme. Then they would see that. Another thing is that they would see this, the pastor usually has a vision. And this grand vision is not just an earthly thing. We're not talking about pastor saying, boy, I see us starting a ministry in the inner city. I see pastor has a grand vision that is looking almost rapturous, like the end of times kind of vision, because the pastor usually has prophetic insight, and in some cases, what we call clairvoyance, can see. And so pastor can predict and have knowledge of things to come. And when pastor tells you of these things to come and you see some of them come true, pastor, of course, is gaining loyalty and credibility. So when pastor tells you that we are to get into the ark because there's going to be a great flood and there's going to be an earthquake in St. James and Montego Bay is going to be flooded out and you have to be in the ark if you want to make it so that you can get to heaven, it never occurred to anybody that you can't get to heaven unless you're dead. You're not going to get there by flesh and blood. Nobody never remember that part of the Bible. So nobody thought of asking, so pastor, so how this ark going to really work? After minutes, nobody building any ark, and they knew it was a spiritual ark. So how we going to get into the spiritual ark if flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven? Nobody never think about them things. They probably thought, especially
if they have been given the rapture doctrine. They probably thought they were going to be caught up. They were going to be transported to rise, and the ark was going to sail in the sky. They had some idea in their mind. And if you read the post of the pastor online, the things you will see, Joseph, bears fruit that the people thought, definitely thought, that they were going to be moving from one place to another destination that pastor had before been preparing them for. We have personality cults here in Jamaica. And you know what? They're in our churches. Pastors are encouraging this, because when you can keep your members dumb and unthinking, uncritical, not opposing you, then it makes for an easier life, easier to manipulate, easier to exploit, easier to abuse, easier to get away with all these things, because nobody will report you.
Rev, very interesting comments there. I am sitting here listening to you, and I'm just trying to fathom if gullible is the right word. I'm not sure, but I'm just trying to fathom how they got into this space.
But you know, Joseph, the people are, sometimes we shouldn't even use the word gullible, because these people are us. Let me tell you, the membership of many cults and cultic organizations and people who follow cult, who engage in cultic personality worship, follow personalities. These are people who have sense, people who have academic qualifications, but all of us operate from a place of human needs. We have some need that the person taps into, and they're meeting that need. And so as long as that need is being met, we don't see anything else.
You know, Rev, in modern day Christendom, we have seen an emergence of the prosperity doctrine, some of which makes certain demands of the persons who become enticed or attracted by it. How far removed is the prosperity doctrine from what we may have seen in Montego Bay?
From what we have seen in Montego Bay, it is not removed. Neither was it removed from the Jim Jones situation, that is the massacre in Guyana. It was not removed from that. And unfortunately, it seems to be embedded, especially in modern scenarios. And if we're using this as, say, the cult of personality thing, we can go even as far back as a Hitler. The reality is that the matter of prosperity has to be understood and not be trivialized and dismissed. One of the things that you find is, one, deliverance. There is always deliverance. There's always the promise of liberation, the promise of freedom, the promise of escaping, the promise of shackles being broken. There is always that element of deliverance. And of course, delivered unto what? Delivered unto prosperity. You see, so prosperity is never far from it. And another way of looking at the deliverance is, of course, healing. You know, because faith healing also goes alongside the prosperity teachings. Because remember, you know, if you are bound down and weighed down by all kinds of illnesses, all kinds of diseases, and all kinds of maladies, then that is certainly not a sign of prosperity. Prosperity must be encompassing all aspects, health, wealth, etc. Prosperity is there. And let me tell you what is one of the main challenges that we have now. And you know, mass media is helping to create more personality cults, because the more people are able to get in front of people with a fake image and to build up and to hype up their personality, once they're able to do that and get a huge following, then they're able to press for resources, they say, to support some ministries, always some ministries that are intended for good. But usually, driven beneath that is a need for income, because the more money you have, the more power you have. The more things you can buy, the more things you can afford, the more things you can change. And so that is it. And it is being copied. People notice this, that you're going to hear the similar language and the similar messages. And today, sadly enough, this prosperity teaching is also accompanying the rise of the prophets and the apostles and the bishops. And you see, look online, everybody's posting their cash apps, and it's almost like the gambling industry. You can put in something so that you can get back a message, a revelation from a prophet or an apostle. And then, where is this going? People don't understand that one of the things that they're missing out on is that if each of you give the prophet or the prophetess or apostle $1 million, that prophet can certainly stand on authority and say how blessed they are. And you can see the success on them, the success which you now begin to hanker after, because after all, if God bless them, they can bless you too. But who is giving you, how many people giving you $1 million each? You are giving you $1 million. So I think that we need to understand that a lot of this is driven by greed, and a lot of it is driven by drunkenness on power, and money and resources prop up power and influence. And that is why some persons are pursuing this. Genuine apostles and prophets and bishops who walk in the example of Jesus walk so selflessly. It doesn't mean that you dismiss having the need for things and material things, but you do give back and give more, and you keep less for yourself, and you ensure that those around you are also lifted up as you are lifted up. So what I see here is not really practicing and preaching the right gospel. It's more people trying to promote get rich quick schemes, almost like Ponzi schemes, and it is defaming the nature of the church and killing the ministry and witness of the church.
Rev, do you think though that this is calling the Christian church back to a place of authentic Bible study, where the believer seeks to understand God for himself or herself, or seeks to strengthen their personal relationship in the Word of God?
Firmly so, definitely so. We have to take a no-nonsense position now. One of the features of modern Christianity, especially I'd say, not modern, contemporary, more so dealing with, say, the last five decades, and definitely the last 3, we're seeing this push against anti-intellectualism. It is saying that you don't need to be intellectual, you don't need to be intelligent, you don't need to use your brain, you don't need to think. And it cannot be true. You have to balance it. Do you notice that in the Gospels, Jesus always had these interactions where people were asking questions, and tough questions, even if they were coming from the so-called scribes and the Pharisees? The fact is, questioning was always a part of the tradition coming up. People asked questions. You ask questions to clarify your faith and go deeper in your convictions, because you now understand why you believe what you believe. But the challenge is, though, Joseph, who will teach the people? If the pastors themselves are not being theologically trained, and being theologically trained doesn't mean that everybody who goes to a theological college are also equipped, because there are many people who go to theological college and the material that they encounter, they dismiss it because they don't want to be challenged in their own faith, so that they can articulate what they believe and be firm in what they believe with confidence. They feel, I have heard so many people go to theological college and dismiss it as being nonsense. This is not necessary. When I go out, I can't use it. It's not true. I firmly dismiss that. It is what you do with what you do, and understand the equipping that you are being called to equip others, how you must break down the technical stuff that you learn to make it simple, so that persons can also grow little by little, but not keep them where they are so that they never learn anything, as if you alone have some great secret and nobody can know that secret. It's how you impart this responsibility, because people are, of course, at different levels. Bible study is critical, and not just a regular Bible study where you go in and take up the Bible and teach verse by verse, but you need to teach Bible study ecumenically. And by that I mean, you need to teach Bible study to help your members to understand the plurality of the context we are in, so that they understand what other people believe. Because too many of our members are running from our churches to go somewhere else, only to realize that is perhaps one little thing there's a difference on. And if you had taught them about it in your church, they wouldn't see any need to leave and go over there to go experience that one little thing. A lot of what we believe we're differing over in Jamaica, it's not true. Bible study must not be abandoned, and it has to be stepped up to match the questions and the issues of the current age. So I say there's no two ways about it. Our people must begin to be taught and to help to ask questions, and pastors must be prepared to be challenged, and don't believe that your position alone is the only position. And that, I believe, is the problem. We don't want to be challenged. We want people to hold the position we hold without realizing that we must also anticipate freedom of religion and freedom of thinking in our own congregations as well, and help everybody to do so responsibly so that we can live together in a complementary way and not a competitive or a oppositional kind of way with all kinds, because that, of course, will lead to another problem, Joseph, which is sectarianism, which is one of the big challenges we have in Jamaica and in the Caribbean, and of course all over the world, where, because I might say I speak in tongues and you might say you don't believe in speaking in tongues, I'm going to break away from the church and go start a church called the Baptist Church that speak in tongues. Nonsense. We don't need to keep doing that. All we're doing is splintering the church beyond recognition. And it's really just boiling down to some personal differences that can be resolved if we were teaching things differently and teaching them the right way.
Rev, interesting points, but I think the hardest coming out of this whole Sunday saga is the Christians coming to a place of authentic faith, of I don't want to say trying to convince the world of the authenticity of Christianity, but I think it further widens the struggle that we face as a Christian community to bring people in. It further threatens, I believe, the argument of trust. What is your final words to the Christian community in the face of this threat, as I see it?
I believe that the true church of God is eternal, and unlike others, or anyone else who might believe so, I don't feel insecure about the future of the church, and I don't say that with any arrogance. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, because the nature of the church is it's spiritual, it's transcendental, meaning that it's not just an earthbound organization of people, but it's something we believe is a gift of God to the whole world, that there are some people who will forever follow and respond to the call of God, to know that God loves, and God's people in response also love. That is what I believe will last until the time when God comes for the world in Christ, for the church. The thing, though, is the expression of that on earth that is shaken. Because the expression of that, the earthly representation, us now as denominations, us now as the religion in general, when these things happen, it surely challenges and it tests our witness. It makes us embarrassed, because the reality is, I've pointed out elsewhere, that before the name cult was applied to this group, they were a church. They were considered a church. They started out as a church. They have constituted themselves as a church. And if you look at a lot of the things that they are doing online, in terms of the clips of the meetings and the gatherings, I am pretty sure, Joseph, that you could point out one or two Baptist churches that look just the same. So I'm just simply saying that until something atrocious takes place, we really can't make a distinction. And so that is why we become embarrassed, because honestly, all along, we were all thinking that we were the same thing. So we now have to wonder, oh gosh, so really, who are the real ones? Who are the true ones? I am saying, as I would only say what the word of God says, by our fruit, by their fruit, you will know them. And the fruit is clear. And this is it, as we look in the word of God, again, we are being reminded of what we are to model. So authenticity right now, before this incident, was in question, Joseph. Were we loving our neighbors? What kind of witness were we bearing in Jamaica and in the world? How are we carrying ourselves? Because a lot of people have already been disenchanted and disillusioned by the church, because we are fighting for center, we are fighting for attention, we're clamoring for all kinds of recognition, we're looking for likes, which is not how the church is supposed to be. We are to be on the margins, where the people are on the margins, where the people are disenfranchised, where the poorest of the poor, where the people who are dirty, where the people who are being shunned, alienated. That's where we are to be found, working in the trenches, hands dirty, looking dirty and ragged, and identifying with the people. But instead, we're all clamoring for video lights. So really, step back, people. Now is the time to step back and to look at ourselves and to see if we are on a similar path, lifting up personalities and worshiping personalities in our pastors, in our leaders. If we are, as a church, fighting and clamoring for headlights and video lights, and if we as a church have forgotten about the poor and instead are seeking to find riches and enriching ourselves, instead of using our resources to help back in the communities, building up communities, if we are challenging the powers that be that are keeping people oppressed, or are we siding with those powers? That's where we need to begin to look at ourselves and say, this is a wake-up call for us, because we might very well be going down the same road and we don't even realize.
Reverend Laws, very interesting conversation. One that could go on and on and on. But as we progress into coming days, we would want to offer our support and prayers for those who are victims of these kinds of atrocities.
Yes, indeed.
And
Definitely.
we also seek to remind them and ourselves that hope in God is all we have. And we must seek then to pursue a renewed hope, one that keeps us in the bond of fellowship, brotherliness, and one that helps us to have a greater understanding of this God we serve. I thank you sincerely for joining me this morning, Reverend Laws, on Conversations Across the World. Do stay safe and be blessed.
Thank you, and bless you too.